As you saw, blues country and gospel made up this rock and roll style. We emphasize the backbeat. The idea was about harmony. Um, the texture was homophonic, meaning same sound, the quality at the same time. All right, so here's some instruments that you found in country music, rock and roll. You had drums, the electric and lead guitar. You had electronic keyboards. You had a lead singer and backup singer. The form for rock and roll was basically binary, and the form usually ran like AABA. So we have idea A twice, then we have idea B, and then we have return of idea A. So that was the form AABA, which is binary because you only deal with two forms, A and B, right? Two useful ideas. Yes, sir. That's right. Here we go. So in 1948, President Harry Truman was successful, or was beginning to bring the federal government's influence on making sure that the mandate for total desegregation in the South happened. So desegregation of armed forces happened in 1948 by President Harry Truman, which of course we are aware of when the little kids um, entered the desegregation. Yes. All right, next. Booming post-war economy. After the war, which was World War II, we talked about that in historical context. That World War II was happening during the rock and roll era, and a lot of individuals were not happy with that. So we get the term hippie from those who were mainstream American media, mainstream Americans.
How you cut yourself, bro?
See something?
Here we go. GI Bill. The GI Bill was the most important thing that happened during the during the post-war, excuse me, let me just put it that way to give you context. During the World War II, after the war was over, the government introduced the GI Bill, right? The GI Bill was designed for veterans, of course. It was to help with things like education and give them the opportunity to buy a house and use that money for whatever they desire, right? You've heard, has anyone heard of any family members who talked about using the GI Bill to buy the house? Your grandpa, was a veteran, and so, et cetera. And so they use the GI Bill to help, pay the bills or buy a house or what have you, stuff like that.
Free education.
Free education, yes. And so the second big push from the GI Bill and from the post-war was the fact that they were starting to build more colleges and universities. Colleges and universities started popping up like wildfire. Now, of course, we know that, at least we understand that during this time, there's still segregation like a big deal in schools, right? Till we get to Brown versus Board for the desegregation of schools in the South and North across the United States, right? We get that. So so this is where you start really getting the funding for a lot of public, we call PWI, public white institutions, government-funded institutions, what happened. Okay, that was a big thing. Colleges and universities started popping up, almost to the rate of once a week, like a new college every week. All right. I did tell you all about that. The first American teenage generation was created an identity because the goal was to separate your identity from your adults, from the adults. They wore suits and ties and hats and white gloves and pretty little lace stockings and closed-toe shoes, and everything was very cordial, hello, how are you? Not, yo, what's good, bruh? All that. Anyhow, that's a culture thing. So they, teenager, American teenager, that term started around because they want to identify something different from the generation prior to, okay? Discretionary income, that's what we talked about with the taxes and the money and that market base with the teenagers at that time were the financial future. So they marketed everything toward them, including all the arts, music, etc. Like Elvis. Elvis sitting around gyrating and dancing and thrusting his hips and all that kind of stuff. And parents would lose their mind because you didn't see this kind of stuff. You didn't see folks walking around, you know, titties out, ass out, you know, big print, all of you didn't see none of this. You didn't see none of this. This was exploitation of the body. Anyhow. So that's why they didn't only film him singing and from the torso up, because they didn't want their daughters sitting around and thinking about sex. You know, no. It was literally almost like a control thing. Like, they literally was like, okay, we are American, and so we're supposed to have only 2 children. And our children are supposed to have but 1 or 2 until they're, you know, after their marriage and stuff. So all of these things, trying to convince the kids to turn up and whatever, get out the way. Here we go. The term rock and roll, just for your information, came about like 1951. There was a disc jockey by the name of Alan Freed, A-L-A-N-F-R-E-E-D, Alan Freed, who coined the term rock and roll, which was made popular from the African American slang phrase for sex that had appeared in many rhythm and blues lyrics, as the song said, "My baby rocks me with a steady roll." So that was Alan Freed, a disc jockey, coined the term rock and roll because he would play the music, the race music, rhythm and blues, and as the new genre started to develop, he coined that term, the new genre, as rock and roll because of the sexual innuendos in all of the music, particularly Elvis. You know, rock around the clock and all that kind of stuff, and just getting it. Here we go, Big Mama Thornton. She was a big artist, and Big Mama Thornton, Thornton.
Big Mama Thornton.
Thornton, yeah, Big Mama Thornton. She was a rhythm and blues singer during the 40s and 50s. Elvis got basically everything from her. The stylistics of his tone, the growl, you know, the sorrowful sound about, you know, pain and emotion, those kind of things to connect with the artist. He was basically telling someone else's story to an unsuspecting artist. All right, so let's talk about this word cover. A cover is a recording made subsequent to the original version that may or may not follow the style or lyrics of the original. As we talked about it during this time, a lot of white bands and Caucasian groups who were supported by the big, you know, record companies were utilizing a lot of the unsung artist music. You know, Big Mama Thornton wasn't going to get on American Bandstand and sing "You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog." No, they would. No. Here we go. So that's the concept of that. Here we go. Let's continue. That concept we're talking about, Race Records. It was basically a market for what they call black music. They call it Race Records, black music. Okay, so there we go. And it comes from rhythm and blues. Because now the term race records was very derogatory during the time. It was, you know, negatively looked upon. You know, they didn't like that, so they had to call it something. Found a way to call it something else. That's when the term rock and roll was more appeasing because it was basically my baby rock with a steady roll. We can go with that. It still keeps the character of the music, but also it takes up the negative stereotypical ideas from it. All right. Here we go.
Back in the middle of the jungle.
Right. Now, rock and roll, basically, as you listen to some of the basically, the way the music was played, the type of instruments used, the way that you interact with your audience, hand clapping, shouting, you know, and dancing, sound like church. Yeah. So those were some, and sometimes improvisation, you know, when you all, when we had the opportunity to see the the one who married his 13-year-old cousin. But then we found out that it really wasn't his third cousin, it was really his first cousin. Absolutely.
You knew there was some kind of relation. Like,
What?
if you got cousin, your name ain't.
It don't matter if you're first or third, it's still cousin.
I think it was like 26 and she was 13 was a big issue for me.
Yeah, that was a big issue.
That was a big
He was a
issue.
pedophile.
Yeah, you right.
Nah, there ain't no, he pedophile.
Right. That, remember I told you, that's like the concept of a teacher, messing with you.
That's different.
That's just,
Y'all about the same age.
different.
what you, that's, how about, that's
I mean, like, you got 18-year-old kids, they know what they doing.
Listen, that's like one of the young ladies messing with one of the hall monitors. Hall monitors, one of them actually graduated from here.
Oh, yeah,
They
I know
have
that.
about
dude.
time, you talking about
No, I'm just saying.
No, not all of them.
Not all, but I'm saying, it's
Last
like,
two that was you. You try to holler at these girls, don't count.
Oh.
Is that why they don't go here?
listen,
That's
when
why
I go there, I don't know nothing.
Yes, you
They
do.
didn't let Coach T know
I
that.
said it
Coach T be feeling on people like in like weird ways.
Don't make me say it ain't nothing. She trying like. Don't say that name. I bet you I said. Don't say that name.
Okay, so the point is, so the point is age relationships, age relations between the age. Now, once you are past, quote, 21, you are a full adult, and so, you know, if the person's 21 and the older dude is 30, that's a different, age relation in the eyes of legality. Make sense? Take it down 5 years, she 16, he 25, that's a different age relation in legality. You get the concept? Still the same 9 years, it's just different. But, would I suggest a teacher mess with the student? Hell no. You know, all this yeah out there. All that yeah out there. All that
Yeah.
Nah, it was the other way around, man.
Okay, so, here we go. So, you know how rock and roll is
No.
stay with me. You know how rock and roll was a big thing during the 60s, right, and late 50s. There's this thing called Old Grand Opry. Grand Ole Opry. Opry, excuse me, O-P-R-Y. That was the style of music during the time, Opry. Old Grand Ole Opry. It was basically that good old hillbilly sound, you know, from the Appalachian Mountains of
I used to
mid-east America. I'll skip Tin Pan Alley, but let's just say Tin Pan Alley, idea concept comes from New York, okay? We'll skip all of that. We talked about Jeff Jesus, Rockefeller, we talked about that. Bill Haley, talked about that. Bill Hillbilly. Talked about him. Chuck Berry, Little Richard. Jerry Bill. Talked about him. So, here's one thing that is in one of the tests. If I ask the question, what were some of the musical emphasis? Listen, I need to hear this in your presentations. What are some of the musical emphases of rock and roll? It says they emphasize sexuality, freedom, and resistance to authority. Sounds like NWA to me.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
You said what?
Sexuality. The question asks, what are some musical emphasis of rock and roll during this time period? Musical emphasis. In music, they emphasize sexuality, they emphasize the concept of freedom, and they emphasize a resistance to authority. I'm not talking about go, you know, get out there and F the police and you get a bullet in your head. No, none of that. They talked about resistance to authority, such as breaking away from the cultural norms of American society, or American middle class society. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. All right, here we go, let's continue. Now, of course, we know rock and roll comes from African American music and musical traditions that manifest, was making its manifestation of the eroding racial barriers that exist in other areas of American society. Another big thing that came out of here was the Brown versus Board of Education in 1954, when the Supreme Court had to hear the case to determine was segregation in public schools legal, and if it needed to be undone, what happens now? Remember, we believe as an intelligent society that everything that is quote legal isn't necessarily morally right or right for the generation it's set for. You know, just like everything that's not legal isn't unmoral.
Yeah, get my weed.
Well, they passed a law, they have their legislation where they're trying to do the cannabis oil for not students, but children and teens who suffer from various syndromes that have to deal with the nervous system.
Yeah, I got ADHD.
That's a different, they treat that with some other kind of medication. They're talking about like, I don't wanna say McGregor syndrome, but, Tourette syndrome, different things where I can't think of the names right now, where you shake, what is that? Parkinson's, and all of these things. These aren't old people diseases. These are genetic deformities that happen in children also. And so they have to find medical solutions that are of the herbalistic nature to help do that, because you don't want to, everybody doesn't want surgery to correct all the issues. So sometimes that works. I would vote for it if it's used for that. Now, if you gonna take that and go, toss it in the backyard and stir it up with some seeds and all that, and make it some super weed, that's a different story. But when it becomes legal, when it becomes legal, they need to go ahead and release everybody they arrested for having that on their possession.
Well, not everybody. Some people,
Weed, like a lot of people are in jail with no bond, or they can't even reach bond or something like that because of weed possession. So I'm saying, when Georgia makes it legal to have that cannabis oil, the dispensary shops and all of that kind, they need to go ahead and release all of the individuals that they locked up.
Yeah, see y'all, my
Of
cousin.
course not. Remember, listen, it's a business, and it's not a public business. Prisons are private businesses. Prisons are not owned by the government. They're not owned by the government.
Yeah, you didn't know that? Somebody paid for that prison.
Somebody who had money bought land, built a building.
Doesn't Michael Jordan own a prison?
I'm not sure.
So basically, like,
They make a lot of money from it.
Yes.
So again,
Every prisoner there is like
they own the land.
what's that basically like? How like the state of it's not owned by
Yeah, so it's like
the land or whatever.
it's thousands of people in prison.
Yeah.
So you telling me,
You know this
we
type of.
sitting in jail and don't even release people who belong to the government, and they make the law.
And so what happens, let's see, what happens was, is that I'm a business owner, right? I own this prison industry, or the prison index industry is a business. So I need product from my business.
I can't lie. If I had enough money to own a prison, I probably would.
So, is Georgia gonna ever make these legal?
Yes, I believe that.
Yeah.
Because, listen, I'm gonna tell you why, because there are a lot of parents that are really pushing for that because of the benefits of that type of oil for their children.
Oh, yeah, because some people use it.
The purpose of getting it legalized is so that they can have the cannabis oil
It actually.
in dispensaries and prescriptions. That's what I'm saying. The purpose of getting cannabis oil, again, is to be for prescriptions and dysphoria. That word, dispensary. dispensary.
Dispensary?
Thank you. Sorry,
I get spam mail for that.
You must have had them in that Super Bowl.
no, y'all, I do so much.
You get a restaurant.
All right, you shall have it. Wait, hey, what's good? All right, here we go. All right, some things that you need to know that came out of rock and roll. So this transition, listen, the transition with, okay, so as you know.
Wake up.
Stop. As you, that's speaking.
I got a question.
Well, I was about to say something, I had to catch myself. Yes,
Prisons are private.
yes.
You go to sleep on the tip side.
Now that belongs to the federal government. And, no, not the state. Federal prison.
That's what I'm thinking, like the government.
Government owns federal prisons. State prisons are private industry. That's why Martin Stewart can go to
Like the
federal.
one down the street, that's a federal prison.
Yeah.
That's federal property, so that belongs to, that's all where all your
That's everything,
white collar criminals
You
go.
can time for federal.
When I say white collar, I mean, bankers who stole money and crime bosses and, folk who got enough money not to be sitting in petty jail. They have enough money not to be sitting in petty jail. I'm talking about something, you go in there and everybody say, yes, sir, what would you like to have today for dinner, Mr. Mr. Robinson, or something like that.
So what about?
Murderers, rapists, etc. All of them folks go to state prison. Folks who commit felonies with finances and federal bank accounts and evasion of taxes, tax fraud, all of them, they go to that one. That's where all the rich people go. Cause you have enough money to be able to.
That was the reason we hired a house though.
So they said,
No, that's for people that's like almost like that.
So, but he was educated, so he went to everybody that he had enrolled in that school. He came to our house and interviewed us. That's a white collar crime, right? So where did he go? Because he didn't have no money.
Well, that's why he went to federal because you do the federal funding.
Beyonce get locked up.
I'm not talking about, you went to homes and got a donation, and instead of building a school, you built your new house, somewhere in South Georgia. No, okay, so, as we see, I wanna make this so, yes.
so do they send those people to a bigger jail because if they send them to a state, they got enough money to bond themselves out?
Absolutely. But it's really not state jail, it's bigger because it's more whole committing that level of crime. When you come up the tier and you start committing level 1 and 2 type crimes, federal crimes, then they send you down in the federal people. You're not going anywhere because they're gonna hit you with a no bond. So you and this rich other person sitting over there, sitting right next to you, y'all gonna order y'all delicious chicken, and they gonna cook it, and they gonna call you yes sir and no ma'am and all of that. You ain't shoved around like some two big criminals because you remember in the real world you have dumb money.
Who's trying to rob the bank?
I see you Wells Fargo, Such when I get out here, I'm going back to my mansion house, my fine wife, and which I'm
Your fine
my
wife is curly
Actually, no. If you
getting their cheeks clapped by
There we go.
Tyrone down the street.
So,
That old game.
listen, I don't ever hear them saying they have anything. Remember, this federal, you get treated different because you're rich, you're rich.
Oh yeah, we gotta do some stocks and bonds.
Right, that's one thing. I'm talking about federal where the guards, open the door for you. Like, they don't call you inmate because you call the wrong rich person inmate when you go to your car that afternoon, you'll probably be, with a shot in the head. Some rich people you don't mess with, like Big Farm.
Like El Chapo.
You don't mess with Big Farm.
Who is Big Farm?
Big Farm, the farm hilarious.
No, that's a big bump.
The Department, Department of Federal Food and Drug Agency, Big Pharma.
No, that's a big bump.
Big Pharma.
You slap that nigga, then
Now,
you get rid
Big
of it.
Pharma, you don't mess with Big Pharma. You
I
talking
didn't
about
mean it.
what? You talking about you about to cure cancer, really? Oh, you talking about you just created a new type of technology that will cure deafness. So that means you messing with my money, cause I'm trying to give you pills to help you cope with your diseases, not cure them, cope
It's
with
support.
them.
There was this
I know, I'm saying that's why they don't.
there was this young college student who was
like find out news, like,
Listen, it's sad that around the world, everybody is you find scientists from around the world who's cured this and fixed that and saved this one and saved that, and all of a sudden, person cured. What was the PhD? The one.
Dr. Sebi.
Dr. Sabi, yes, him. But it's funny, he died from a penicillin shot
Yeah.
in jail.
And
Yeah.
he said the government is making these diseases.
They are. That was right. Like
They
they
might
put these
be
different
diseases
strains
on
of the
budget,
flu.
right?
My thing is this, listen, okay, outside of the concept of conspiracy, let's be intelligent about it. I need you to research when these diseases started, from what regions were they started, and which populations or groups of people did these diseases take place in. Okay, let's say, here's a concept and conversation that I've had with some colleagues of mine who are scientists, okay? They say, Adrian, I say, well, we sit down and have a good time talking about wings and all other kind of stuff, and jobs and life and spouse and partners and all that. So it's like, hey, look at during the 1980s, right? What are your thoughts about this? The HIV/AIDS, epidemic. I said, well, it's interesting because when we first identified the disease, it was predominantly in Caucasian males who were engaging in same-sex activities during this time frame. And that epidemic started it developed out of, nowhere, because my thing is this, create a disease, create a reason to have protection. You know how, let's get real. Yeah, listen, I'm one of the real teachers, amen. So what happens, like, let's say you teenagers have this conversation about, oh yeah, she let me hit it raw. Or, she hit it raw, or, even the other side, you let me hit it raw. Okay, yeah, all that. Wait, just because again, remember that conversation about 2 months ago? Just because it's foreign to you doesn't mean that it's foreign to someone else engaging in these things. Just your kind of sex is your kind of sex. Their kind of sex is their kind of sex. I have run into a lot of, heteronormative young men who are interested in the transgender individuals because it offers them the opportunity to engage in both worlds without guilt. So let's move that conversation along. Point is this, is that diseases, so when for 10,000 years you were having sex without protection.
Yeah.
Let's just give it a number. For 10,000 years you had sex without protection.
Now you got
and you had children, but you also, as responsible adults, you timed it. Okay, well, we're going to have 4 children, and so we're going to practice this way in order to have 4 children and no more. What happened, right? So all of a sudden, you have this concept where diseases are starting to develop. I'm not talking about just polio and all that kind of stuff that come from across the seas. Yeah. So you have this concept of having sex. Now there's disease. Oh my God, this is scary. You have to find something. You have to stop having sex. You have to stop having children, or otherwise your children be infected with this disease. Or something, some kind of sexually transmitted disease, what have you. That created a laboratory somewhere in the South. Anyhow, so with that being said, now you have Durex and latex condoms and lambskin condoms and and non-latex condoms You know, those companies like, you know, Trojan and Durex and, Lifestyle, you know.
What do you mean
I
lambskin?
pick up off of
Yeah,
people
that's, you know, and
put on my show.
Wait. Like literal skin?
Beat that little back end, that's a whole lot of back.
So the concept is that the disease was created, but then also the organization developed to have a market for that. Sex is a big seller, baby. It's a big seller. Whether you're having sex with somebody or by yourself, it's a big seller. And so there are companies out there that target that concept
Why
of.
would you need a condom if it's by yourself?
I listen. I just needed us to pass by that door coming down the hallway. You want to open the door, talking about, so what's up in here? No,
I do that
close-
actually. I like
just-
bust into people's room. I don't even know
just
what teacher
close-
it is.
Just close the door and let me lock it back. All right, just keep on walking. We walking down the stairs. Come on. The downstairs where we
It's not
trying
hard
to
to
go.
kick in the
You
door.
try to peek in the room, talking about, so what's going on up in here? None of your business. Lock the door and come on down the hall. Come on, students, we're going down the hall. So the concept is that. So the concept with that is that when disease was created, what have you, biological disease, I believe in laboratories to control the population. I believe based off of data and historical perspective, create diseases to control population, control the expansion of certain cultures and ethnic backgrounds, yeah. And then also, I don't want to say euthanize, but I want to say neutralize, that's a good word, neutralize certain social cultures from engaging in further sexual practices.
I got a question.
So somebody made a jump statement that said they created AIDS to kill off the gays.
I got a question.
Now, whatever the scientists decide, whatever was in his or her
Cure for
mind
gays.
when they created this disease, they had a purpose for it, and so that purpose is being fulfilled, and it's unfortunately happened to be spreading into, but it was never, quote, a gay disease, you know, because you had DL men and heterosexuals having sex, and they decided to have sex with somebody who was having sex, who might have contracted the disease, but you didn't know you had the disease, but then it's as aggressive, but that used to be a death sentence. Once you got it, it took over your immune system, and you were dead in a year, stuff like that. Now they have the medication, come on, stay with me, consumer science. Now they have the medication to give the lifelong expectancy of the person who has contracted the disease to live longer, right? But also, maybe you might not know that homegirl got it, or homeboy got it, and you still like them because they just a regular, a cool dude, a cool girl. Y'all kidding. So now the consumer science said this. All right, let's create a pill that's going to combat the disease, but we're going to give it to the non-reactive partner. So you date this fine dude who got it, but he got you. You know,
Man,
you
you
his queen. You everything he did.
You know what we were talking about?
But you want to be everything to him too. So you're going to go ahead to the doctor. You're going to get your blood tested. It's going to come up negative or non-reactive. Your doctor's going to prescribe you the same kind of medicine that your boyfriend or husband is taking, so that you don't get the disease, right? But now, Big Pharma got 2 people on the pill instead of just 1. So instead of making that 3 G's a month off of each person that has to take a pill, then you now got $6,000 out that household, and your insurance premiums, that company now is in cahoots with Big Pharma, so somebody's got to pay for it. And so they're charging it to the insurance company. The insurance company is charging it back to the government, and the government keep hollering about we're going broke because we're paying too much money into federal programs, and the federal program under federal law is all these programs that actually provide the money for the medication that the gentleman who has contracted disease now has. So see how the cycle of money
It's like
is
the
rolling?
Illuminati.
Huh?
It's like the Illuminati.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Do you think,
America is really
population control
Illuminati.
is necessary?
Well, in some cultures across the seas, in Eastern cultures, that is a big thing. Now, some areas over in Eastern culture have gotten I don't want to say out of control, but they have not adhered to those type of mandates. Now, there are some cultures where, you know, your child can be taken and sold or something, or killed or whatever, because you and your wife had 2 children, and then all of a sudden you got Valentine's Day came around and baby was looking real good, and you decided to shake that head for one more time, and then November come around, and then guess what? She got a child. Oh, the government
Not
coming
mine.
to take your child.
I
And
got-
that
I got
does
a
happen.
story, Mr.
But I'm
Cole.
saying
But that does happen though.
I'm saying like,
I got a story.
I'm saying like extreme measures of like extreme population control measures.
Yeah, like you know, hey, you're not supposed to have children, otherwise the government will take your child. That's an extreme. They're not gonna come and kill you all,
I'm saying like, that's cool, you know, I ain't-
or neutralize you where you can't have.
No,
Now there is a possibility that
They had that thing where they were paying people like $10,000 to get like, what's it called when they cut your nuts?
they don't cut your nuts. It's called a vasectomy.
They do cut your balls off.
No, they do not cut.
They snip the line where you
They basically not there.
Okay, so let's talk about human anatomy. Because these terms
like swinging an air ball.
are unacceptable in the scientific community. They do not, listen, you're not being spayed and neutered, you're not animals.
They cut the same.
Can I explain?
Yeah, go ahead.
What they do is called a vasectomy. The visceral tube that connects to the testes from the internal organ, which produces the life-giving sperm or spermination that comes from the testes through the visceral tube in the shaft of the penis. I'm trying to be intelligent.
Oh, wow.
So me and them breaking it down.
Alright, that's cool.
So the point is that if they snip or if they detach that tube from the area that
This man travel.
if they detach that area, if they detach the tube, what happens is that the fluid that mixes with the sperm will not come through your shaft area and inject itself.
So where does it go?
So the nuts will not fly.
So hold on, where does it go? It just stays there forever now?
Put it all together.
That thing gonna blow up.
It's a fluid, so it's going to engage, it's going to retract back into the body. It's like
Will you
it's
like
right-
sweat it out then?
No, what happened? Listen, okay, so
Been an interesting Thursday.
listen, y'all lucky I work
The
for
man, come on, come on.
Be quiet. No, I'm not about to dry penis. I'm just going to say, hold on.
Bruh, Lentavius like fell asleep at the wrong time. She leaned to the side.
You drawing bags in that bad
This is the point. What you think the vascular tube is? So, all right. So there is the veins and the vascular tube, right? That connects through.
I didn't know this was health class.
It wasn't supposed to be.
This
They
is my
wanna talk
favorite
sense.
class. We go from music to nuts.
Here we go. So it goes through, but before it gets to this part, there is no.
Shut up, let him explain.
During this era, during this part, what happens is that this area, we'll call this the tank.
The ball.
The tank that is connected to produces the semen that goes through the eustachian tube and the vascular tube. The vascular tube is where the eustachian tube is where the urination comes out from the bladder.
The left ball.
No, stupid. The bladder.
The right ball.
Get your ass down. The bladder. The bladder. And this has nothing to do with musicality. rock and roll.
It does.
Yes, it
Then
does.
Watch that, I'm finna relate to it.
Right.
What Elvis used to do?
What-
Thrust.
So, when you cut this tube, and you cut this tube from here, it will, heal itself and close off. That way, it doesn't, whatever, it doesn't come out.
So
It doesn't.
It does
It
not
just-
travel.
So you don't have your money.
it's just stuck.
You basically, you ain't busting them.
What you busting in?
Shooting blanks, nigga. Shooting blanks.
Because
Shooting
again,
Star Wars guns.
again, both tubes
Baby, baby, I'm about
connect
to
in a
keep-
certain way that will push out a certain liquid. But there's a little switch here.
So does it look the same?
What?
Like,
I don't
finished
know.
product.
I don't know. Like, hey, you just finished? Pull out. Let me see what this looks like. No, stupid. Here we go. So there's a switch.
So,
A switch. Listen. You know what? We're done with this lesson. I'm trying to explain it, but y'all keep talking dumb shit. But then y'all gonna get out there and get stupid and have you catch this shit out here. Come on. You don't know what you're doing.
we done.
Yes.
That's just like how social media or like the media period.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So they making men who needs one, they making them think that it hurts and stuff, like you said, like they're cutting their balls and stuff. But it was this comment on Instagram or whatever, this man had his wife had asked him to get a vasectomy, and he was like, no, I'm getting a vasectomy, or they already got like 3 children. And then a man in the commented, and was like, it's not that bad, like actually, it doesn't hurt when they do it, cause it's like how you was explaining how they go in and take out like the vein, so it's not traveling and stuff like that.
Yeah. So listen, again, this is not sex ed, and I'm not supposed to be
It
teaching.
need to be.
Exactly. We kind of do need a sex ed.
Y'all don't learn nothing.
That's an important class to have in high school.
We will actually listen more in that class than anything else.
Just because you can't keep your
Do it again.
I don't know what I be doing.
No, they open, okay, so they go through the soft tissue of the testing sac. They go in, cause it literally is a sac. And so they go into the sac, and they go ahead and snip this part right here, click, and they let it heal, and then they put a little suture there and sew you back up. I promise, it takes all of 20 minutes. The longest time is actually putting the injecting with the Novocaine. That takes longer for it to set, to numb it. It's simple. But population control, yeah.
How old you gotta be to get one of those?
Legal age.
You want one?
Yeah, nigga, fuck.
Oh man, you want somebody?
I'll get kids later. Shit, I'll make some, in case I feel like, hey.
I'll adopt.
Yeah, exactly. Adoption is better. I want me an
Listen,
easy
I'll
kid.
adopt because I'll adopt. You don't even know the levels and numbers of students who are adopted or not adopted or go through the home and go through extra. They
wanna
go through a
adopt a
lot
white baby.
in foster care.
Well, I'm gonna beat that thing up and then
I know another thing to know.
I wouldn't adopt anybody else.
Stop. A vasectomy does not affect your ability to perform.
If anything, it makes it better because you ain't.
That's the whole purpose of cutting the thing.
Check your statement. What do
I
you
got
say?
another thing.
I'm gonna beat that thing up.
But I'm saying, a vasectomy does not affect your ability to perform, meaning you can still engage in normal sexual activity.
Repeat that thing up just with no words.
I'm gonna adopt after that.
Okay, that's fine. Here we go. Let me finish. Let me finish. What time is it? Everybody get them moving around.
3:17.
All right, let me finish this 3 minutes. Here we go. So, we understand that with rock and roll, we understand that drugs were a big thing, right?
Yes.
Disco,
Extremely big.
big thing. It was a big thing. Drugs and disco and all of these things,
Okay.
right? So what happened was, during this drug era with the hippies, smoking weed and just dropping out of American society just to chill, that was the big thing, okay? Also, doing drugs was a big thing, right? So, with this being said, then you have this idea of developing acid, right? Acid, you know, that stuff that just make you crazy. LSD acid, but it's like, what's the one that make you itch your skin?
Bath salt.
That's all, yeah.
Okay, what was it 20 years ago called?
Bath salt.
No, it's
Because it was literally bath salts.
okay, so it's, I'm trying to think, it's, oh my God. It's, you know how you see people who've been on this drug and they have like cuts and holes and,
Crack cocaine?
no, I'm talking heroin, it's not heroin, it's stronger than that.
Is it meth?
Is it meth? Methadone.
Oh,
Methadone.
You know your drugs.
Meth. They chew their skin and eat, I mean, cause it's just something that's unnerving about taking that drug.
I don't like my skin.
And they'll literally take a knife and cut it off.
Yeah, they start hallucinating too. Yeah,
they eyes be talking big.
All right, so the point is, listen, so the point is this, is that during this drug era increase, then you have a lot of bands, like you have this thing called acid rock and psychedelic, hallucinogens, those kind of things, mushrooms, weed, brownies.
You know shrooms is legal in China?
Probably so. It's probably during medicinal, it's probably medicine. So you have metal rock, like metal bands, hard rock.
Oh, I thought
You have alternative, you have punk, gauge, and post-punk. You have all of these things, right? So, and then you have alternative and indie rock, right? So, yeah, independent. Now, last thing. Conclusion, I'm gonna read this. Its emergence in the 1950s signaled a move away from the dominance of European-based culture to a culture that clearly incorporates the influence of ethnic and racial groups, particularly those of African American descent. And the last part is this. Through rock and roll's motion, it went from acoustic instruments to electronic. Why? Because that was the age of technology it started to develop. So they went from acoustic guitar to electric guitar, acoustic bass, boom, 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 to electric bass. From acoustic piano, boom, 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 to electric piano. All of that. And so it helped herald this transition into the national global community. Are there any questions? Are there any questions? Did we get all of the notes? Did we get all of that? Those are all tests. That is testable. Hello, did y'all hear me?
Dang.